goes on here, and also community life. And what we're here to talk to you about today is interfaith relations, principally Jewish, Christian and Muslim relations. But the Three Faiths Forum, which is the organisation that we're from, also works with Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist and atheist communities as well, because we see that it's important as not just from the point of view of religions, people understanding each other's religions, but people understanding each other as human beings and coming together and understanding where someone is coming from, and even identifying, finding the similarities, the similar values, the similar beliefs, the similar passions, the similar likes and dislikes. That means that people can work together to create a better society, a better world. I will say straight away that London is a very diverse place. There's lots of people of different faiths and beliefs. You may have seen actually walking around that there's people who dress in all different ways, people from all different countries, backgrounds, ethnicities. So we are living in what is sometimes called a melting pot of different cultures. And while in some ways that's a wonderful thing, sometimes, although you see people mixing in the street and walking past each other, that's exactly what's happening. They're walking past each other, they're not really seeing each other, they're not getting the chance to talk to each other. Slow down. Yeah, I talk fast. Feel free to wave a hand. So they're walking past each other, they're not having the chance to ask each other questions or encounter each other. So Three Faiths Forum was set up in 1997 by a Muslim, a Christian and a Jew, who all felt that more could be done to bring people together to really see each other and hear each other, and also to work together. So for many years, they brought together leadership, so rabbis, priests, imams, leaders of communities, to talk about theology, to talk about God, to talk about holy books, and for many years that they did really, really good work. But what we weren't doing was reaching into the communities to speak to young people like yourselves, and that's what we decided to do about 5 years ago. We started work on a schools program where we found that there's, how many of you, just out of interest, how many of you go to Jewish schools? Yeah? And how many of you go to schools where there's a mixture of people of different backgrounds? Okay, but maybe about half-half. Interesting. So, when we first started the schools program, we thought, let's go to the schools where there's almost entirely one faith, so a Jewish school, or a Muslim school, or a Christian school, and let's take people like us, young people of different faiths, to talk to them, to explain to them what they believe, and to answer questions, and to look also at sacred texts, so look at Tanakh, look at the Quran, look at the Bible together, and discuss. So we started to do that. We started to go to Muslim schools, Jewish schools, Christian schools, and it was amazing. People were really interested. I was a little bit worried about going into a Christian school or a Muslim school and thinking, what are they going to think? Some of them had never met a Jewish person before. This is the first Jewish person that they met. Maybe that's an experience that some of you have had, that you're the only Jew in the classroom. Well, I felt like the only Jew in the classroom. And but we set very clear rules how we're going to interact, how we're going to respect each other, and it was really exciting and phenomenal. So now we work in something like 70 schools, and not just the single faith schools, schools also with people of all different beliefs, to help them to, first of all, learn about those different beliefs, those different religions, but second of all, to learn the skills that they need to be able to ask the questions, even the difficult questions, even the controversial questions, questions that maybe you don't want to ask because you think, oh, the person might be upset with me if I ask them that. Finding a way to ask things and to answer each other and to dialogue, even if we don't agree. So, what we're going to do today, I want to show you a short clip from Channel 4, which is one of our 5 channels here in Britain. This is Sana behind me, and she is our Muslim education officer. So she works in the office with me. Yeah, we'll move out of the way. We were asked by Channel 4 to film a short clip about their question that they were asking was, can Muslims and Jews ever find peace? Can Muslims and Jews ever find peace? Let me ask you, why would they ask the question, can Jews and Muslims ever find peace? Why would they ask that?
Because of war between Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, I think that's why. I think they thought, well, Jews and Muslims are at war. Can they ever find peace? Right.
They have got pretty negative past, right, history with each other.
Ah, so they had maybe the television producers had a perception that this was a negative history that they had together, although that's not necessarily true if you look back through the ages. So yeah.
Maybe because most people think that they can't, so it's better to ask the question.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the producers thought most people probably think that Muslims and Jews are at conflict in some way. So this is what Sana answered. I'm in the background. I didn't say anything, but let's hear what Sana had to say about that. It will work.
You're watching 4OD on channel4.com.
I think if I heard someone saying that Jews and Muslims can't be friends, I would find that really ridiculous. My name is Sana Umair, I'm a Muslim, and I'm here with Debbie Danon, who is Jewish. We're friends and colleagues. I'm optimistic that Jews and Muslims can find peace, and I know that some already have. It's not that Debbie sees me as a Muslim and I see her as a Jewish person. We just see each other as young British women. There was a time when we went into a workshop and right at the end of the workshop, this was a girls' school, the girls turned and said to us, oh, can we just check in? I mean, are you really friends or have you been paid to be friends? We were shocked at this idea that these young people had these ideas, had these stereotypes that Jews and Muslims really can't be friends. Of course, there are issues between Jews and Muslims in the Middle East, but I don't think that this means that Jewish and Muslim communities around the world won't be at peace. Sometimes young Muslims living in London, when they see issues that happen in the Middle East, they can get very emotive about it, as do I. I get emotive about Middle East issues as well. In a school session once, some Muslim students were really calling one of our British Jewish speakers baby killer and really just forgetting that that person was a young British Jewish person and really just aligning them as just Israeli. I stood up and I reminded them that actually the prophetic way in dealing with such things like conflict and emotive issues is that you have to be a bit more pragmatic. You have to remember that coexistence and understanding and working together is the higher moral principle to work towards.
So, sorry, we couldn't slow down Sana. She was already recorded. Was there anything anyone noticed about what Sana said or how she said it? Was anything surprising about what she said? Yeah.
She used the, like she said, prophetic way, the Quran, to tell them they were wrong. So it means, like, to me what it means is like, just don't judge too fast with something you misread.
Absolutely. I think that's really key to what we teach. Absolutely.
I thought it was really interesting when she pointed out that a lot of people confuse Jewish with Israeli, and I often find myself like arguing that as well. You're forgetting that I'm not actually Israeli, it's not my fault. I'm not there, and I do maybe agree with Israel, I agree with some things they do, but I don't agree with everything they do, and that's as it should be.
Right, and I think this is often what happens as well, where you take one person, a lot of people take one person who they meet and they generalise. So, does everyone know what generalise means? So they make a statement about all people like that. And that's absolutely what we're trying to fight against in this work, and I think Sana said it really well. Thank you for that. Great. So that's really a little bit why we do what we do. I'm going to hand over to Stephanie and to Ali to talk a little bit about who they are, tell you a little bit about their lives and about their faith journey, and then I'm going to ask you guys to turn to each other, do a little bit of sharing and thinking, and then we're going to have a dialogue and a discussion. And then maybe towards the end of our session, we can think about what this means for you as young Jewish leaders from Europe, going back to your communities. What does having an interfaith experience look like in your community, and how can you help to build interfaith harmony and relations? So, I will hand over to Stephanie. Oh.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. For the last 10 years, I've lived in New York. So, what do you guys know about New York? It's what?
It's in the United States.
It's in the United States. Okay. What else?
Big Jewish population.
Big Jewish population, absolutely. Yeah. What else? What's the stereotypical New Yorker like? Rich. Rich. Fast. Everything's fast, right? So, if I'm talking like a New Yorker, just go like this, or go like this, and I'll slow down, I promise. So, before New York, I was raised in a city called Chicago. Anybody know Chicago? Anybody? What do you guys know about Chicago? Windy City. Yeah. Do you know why it's called the Windy City? It's called the Windy City because the politicians talked and it was just hot air. It's not because it's actually a windy city. What else do you guys know?
Al Capone.
What's that?
Al Capone.
Al Capone. Yeah.
There was a great mafia network.
Big mafia network. Before my time.
Good basketball team.
A lot of Lithuanians. I didn't know that. What else? Okay, so the thing about Chicago that a lot of people don't know unless you live there is it's very segregated. Does anybody know what that means? Segregated.
Separation of people.
Separation of people of different skin colors, people of different nationalities, and people of different religions. So I grew up in an area that was all Italian and all Catholic. All. I didn't meet anyone who wasn't Italian and wasn't Catholic until I went to secondary school or high school, as we call it in the States. Nobody. I thought everyone was Italian and Catholic. I had no idea there were other people. So I was growing up and loved the Catholic faith. Loved it. I thought church was so exciting. We had all these. Has anybody been to a Catholic church? Yeah, Catholic church. They're beautiful. They're beautiful. They're huge and they're glorious and there's all kinds of jewels and gold and they're gorgeous and it's all this pomp and tradition and incense and it smells great. So I loved it when I was growing up. And then when I got a little older, I still appreciated being Catholic because being Catholic, there's a lot of focus on particular female characters from the Bible, like the mother of Jesus. And so for me, this was a little different than other Christian faiths who maybe don't focus on Mary as much. So for me, it was very exciting. There's other people like me in the Bible who are focused on. So I really loved it. So I went away to college and I start meeting people who are atheists and I start meeting a couple of Jewish people and I don't think I met any Muslims though, I have to say, until I moved to New York. So am I talking too fast, America? Okay, I'm okay. So I went away to college, start meeting a few more people, still consider myself Catholic because I was raised a Catholic. And then I graduate from college and I'm dating this guy. And he thinks that he's Christian. He was raised in Texas. Anybody know anything about Texas?
Yeah.
What do you know?
Rodeos.
Rodeos. Do you think there's a lot of, have you heard George Bush? We want it. Anybody think there's a lot of diversity? A lot of, you think so?
Texas?
Yeah.
No.
No,
Not
it's
that
not
much.
actually.
Oh, no.
It's pretty white bread America. So he was raised in Texas. He was raised Methodist, which is a type of Christian. And so he's now 21, 22 years old, and his grandmother starts suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. Everybody, she
Yeah.
kind of starts forgetting things. So all of a sudden, she starts talking about Germany, and she starts talking about something that they don't understand. And they find out that the father's family, before the father was born, had fled Germany because they were Jewish and had come to the United States, and his parents had been born in the United States and they had been raised Christian because the family they felt that as Jews they might be persecuted even in the United States. So they buried the fact that they were Jewish. So what do you guys think? You're 22 years old and you find out the faith that you were raised in is not your faith. What do you think? I mean, anybody have any? Yeah.
I think it's still your faith, because faith is something you decide or your parents decide for you. It's not, to me, it's not a question of origins. It's
Okay.
more a question of the philosophy you were raised in. For example, if I have like Arabic origins
Okay.
that are really close, but still I'm Jewish, and even if I have Muslim people like really far in my origins, they are still in my origins. I still come from them, so still I'm Jewish.
So you would have stayed a Christian had
Yeah.
you gone through this. Okay, anybody feel differently? Anyone feel like you would have been like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to be Jewish? Anybody? No? So the whole family, yeah.
I think it would cause me to question and search more deeply into the actual religion.
Exactly. So what were you going to say?
I have many examples when people are born to the Christian family, but then they found any grandparents or some other relatives that are Jewish, and they understood that it's their religion.
Right.
It's their religion.
Right. So this is what happened, kind of what you guys are saying. His whole family went through this turmoil and crisis of faith, and said, are we Christian? Are we Jewish? What are we? So what ended up happening, I'll just give away the ending. His sister converted to Judaism. His parents remained Muslim, they're in a new religion. His parents remained Christian, and he became an atheist. And the whole family, so holidays were a little crazy. So we started celebrating Passover and Easter, Hanukkah and Christmas, and it's big. So this made me realize, though, watching this happen with this family that I really loved, it made me start questioning, why am I Catholic? Am I truly a Catholic, or do I just think I'm a Catholic because I was raised a Catholic? So it got me questioning things. What ended up is I found a few things about the Catholic faith that I don't agree with at all. For example, everyone knows Pope.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be infallible. He's supposed to be the Word of God. No. For me, he's a human being. And he's the head of the church, but he's certainly not perfect. So big things like that started really kind of weighing on me. And I decided, you know what, I would no longer consider myself a Catholic, but I definitely am still a Christian. But I've kind of decided it's time for me to start looking at my faith and figure out, where do I go next, and what am I, and what do I really believe? So led me to kind of a crisis of my own faith. So that's where I am today, and you guys are going to get to ask me questions at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Over to Anne.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all know everybody's speaking different languages, so if I say shalom, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we all can share this. For me, as a Muslim, my understanding, especially now, recently in the past couple of years, is a lot more going deeper into the religion and understanding why we do things. Why am I told to do this at a certain time of the day? Why do I do this within the year? And what I find that it all comes down to is my behavior. It's all helping me understand and build to become a man, to become a human being, and the best human being I can become. So in Islam we have an understanding saying your tongue, there, your tongue is a witness to your intellect. I don't mean intellect as in multiplying 5 billion by 625. I'm not talking about that kind of intellect. An intellect meaning the more knowledge I gain, the more aware I am of my behavior. So, did you understand what I'm saying?
What was your quote?
Thank you.
Your tongue is something to intellect.
Your tongue is a witness to your intellect.
So as I say, the knowledge, the more knowledge you gain, the more aware you are of how you interact with so many different people. So you can imagine this world we exist in now, if we were created as one people, one nation, with one feature, one colour, one language, one culture, one religion, it would be boring. It would be so boring. But I think we would also lose the advantage of meeting others. And I see that the advantage of meeting others is, along the lines, someone else will introduce you to yourself. Do you understand what I mean by that? So let's say, for example, conflicts, arguments, people screaming and shouting at each other. But there are times when after, say a few days later, or we've gone our separate ways, we regret. We think, you know what, I shouldn't have shouted, I shouldn't have screamed, I shouldn't have got angry. And to me, this is all building and understanding how I behave with others. I'm not just talking about a conflict we see on the news. I'm talking about the conflict we see in different countries. We talk about conflict also with our family, our friends, strangers, our loved ones. So for me, I remember I had a really big argument with a friend one time. And then a few days later, I read a verse of the Quran talking about the events of Musa, Moses. The event where he's told to go to the Pharaoh, and God is telling him, go to the Pharaoh and tell him to stop what he's doing. This injustice, all these wrong things he's doing to the people. Tell him to stop. And Moses is saying, how can I? I'm just one single man, I have one stick, and I have one item of clothing. Look at him, he's a king. He has palaces, he has an army. His bed's made of gold, he's got gold everywhere. And then the reply is said to Moses, you need to approach him, all you need to do is approach him with a soft tongue and sound logic. So this soft tongue, don't approach him harshly, don't condemn him. And when I look at the events of Moses and how he talks to him, the same events in the Torah and how it is referred into the Bible, into the Gospels. How he approaches him, he doesn't say, you're going to hell, I'm going to heaven, see you later. Nice to know you. He doesn't do that at all. He says, stop what you're doing and join me. So he creates this common ground so that we can all share. So he's trying to create this friendship. He's sharing, he's saying, you know, join us, join me. So for me, it's a good example for me to how I interact with other people. They'll be along the lines of this, understand this word diversity. Is sharing. So different cultures, different people sharing. It's beautiful, but at times there will be conflicts. And I think what is most important is how we deal with these conflicts. So for me, the prophets in all of our scriptures are for me, are the ones that introduced me to myself. Thank you.
So usually when we go into schools where there are people of all different faiths, we all speak. I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes about me and how I came to be a Jewish person working in interfaith, and then it's going to be over to you guys. So I was raised in South London. It's a place where there's not a big Jewish community. So I always went to school with Hindus, Muslims, Christians, atheists, people of all different backgrounds. But I was really proud and really happy to be Jewish, and I always wanted to share food from Jewish festivals and songs and things like that with my friends. And they were usually very excited and interested, and they were also happy to share. So I always had a positive experience growing up of people of different religions and backgrounds. We all got along really, really well. And actually, I felt more strange going to North London, where there was a big Jewish community, and I felt a bit, I'm not the only Jew in the classroom anymore. So, I think that has maybe always been the root of my passion, my interest in bringing people together across different cultures and beliefs. Because for me, it was never a question of can people get on, because I knew from a very young age that of course it's possible. It's not an option not for us not to get on. So I went to a Jewish youth group with Daniel for many years. I did youth leadership like a lot of you did. And I thought at that time that I would probably do something in the Jewish community later on, but I didn't know what it would be. I went to Israel for a year. I studied Jewish studies. I studied Hebrew, and I had applied to go to university in England, in Cambridge, to study Hebrew and French, and I applied to do languages. And then I got to Israel, and I started to study the history. Someone was saying about the history of Jews, Christians, and Muslims in the Holy Land, and I thought, I have to study this. I have to know more about this. This is fascinating. A lot of the times people had said to me, oh yes, Muslims and Jews and Christians, they've been at conflict forever. There's never been a time when they haven't been at war with each other. And I knew from my, you're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
No, I know in Sunday schools when we were little, we read tales about history, and I know that isn't true.
Absolutely, right. So we know that this isn't true because we've heard stories, and my parents came from Turkey. We have some Istanbulers here, I think. Hi, Sarah. My parents, sorry to embarrass you. My parents were from Istanbul, from Turkey, and they, of course, lived around Christians and Muslims, and sometimes there were tensions, but mostly they had neighbours. In fact, my mum tells me a story of when she was little. Her mum came in to fetch her from the neighbour's house for dinner, and she was lying on the floor, and she said, what are you doing? She says, I'm praying with Mariam. And her mother was like, what are you doing? So, it was that they were comfortable together, I think. So, in a sense, I knew when I started studying this stuff that I really wanted to get to the bottom of it. I wanted to learn about Spain and the times when, in history, where traditionally people got on. Like, yeah, lovely men, So I went to university. I changed my course. I called the university. I said, I've got a different idea. And I started to study theology, so religion, the study of religion and philosophy. And I met on my course in my building, studying my course, was me, Susanna, the Christian, Sidra, the Muslim, Sarah, the agnostic, so the one who didn't know whether she believed or not, what she believed. She was open to new ideas. And our tutor, our teacher, was the dean, the chaplain, the priest of the college. And he was so excited. He said, we are going to have the best discussions. And we really did. And I got really hooked on this stuff, but I never thought that I would work in this environment. I never thought that there would be a job for me doing interfaith dialogue, which was something that I found so exciting and so important. And I was lucky enough that I managed to find this job through a friend who was also at Cambridge, and she, Miriam, is now in Israel, in Jerusalem. She has our Jerusalem office of the Three Faiths Forum, and she works with Jewish, Christian, and Muslim people in Israel and the Palestinian territories, working together to find ways of connecting each other, of being human in each other's eyes, like you were saying, approaching each other with a soft tongue. So it's not just here that we work, and that really excites me that we've got so much, as Jewish people, we have such a great opportunity to obviously teach about what we know and about our experience, but to connect with these, particularly with these two faiths, but also with people of other faiths, on this deeper than human level. And I'd like to see what you guys have to ask these guys about about their faith and maybe the things they believe, about the way they practice, maybe what they do, and also about their experience of living in different places. So Stephanie in the United States and here, and Ali growing up in London. So what I'd like you to do is turn to each other and maybe share something that you learned from these guys, and something that you would like to ask more about. And it doesn't have to be something that they've spoken about. It can be something that you've always wanted to ask a Catholic, or you always wanted to know from a Muslim, but you never got the chance to ask. So turn to your friend next to you in pairs, and we'll bring you back in a second.
It was meant to be like a pair.
Yeah.
Slowly start coming back to the front. Hopefully you have some thoughts, some questions that you'd like to ask. And really, we say you can ask absolutely anything. Seize the opportunity. This is a safe space. As long as it's respectful, we will try and answer any of your questions. So, yes. If you want to say your name before you say your question, that would be lovely as well.
And
country, yes.
I'm Sandy from Turkey. How can we break the prejudice? Because it's the main problem, like, to be united. It's hard.
Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit more about what you mean by prejudice and who and how?
Like in the community, not community, where we live. Like there's other, like, they thought that there are stereotypes, like Jewish or Muslims or Christians. How we, like, break them, like,
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, of course.
So I only started working in interfaith in January, and before January, I would never tell people what faith I was, and I would never ask them what faith they were, because it felt like it was off limits. It was not a secret, but I shouldn't ask that. And I find now when I tell people what I do, they're fascinated and they want to know more about what the organization does and more about what I believe, and then we talk about what they believe, And I find the more you talk about your faith and the more you ask questions politely and not aggressively, I think it really helps for people to understand each other. So I think people communicating more is really, really important, and I think we should all, my opinion is we should all be trying to do that, asking questions and sharing our faith. That's my feeling.
I'm finding more and more as I get older, the more I meet people, the more I study into history. You look at the history, especially in Turkey, in other countries as well. There's so many different parts of life that have created conflict, not just two people with different religions. You have politics in there. You have, you understand the word ego? Big-headed. Yeah. I am this, you are this. I am this big, you are this big. There's a lot of that goes on. That will never end. But I'm sure everybody here wants to create this community where we all get along. We're all different, and we all can get along. You know, when you go back home, if you look at some examples in history, if you look at examples of our prophets and our scriptures, all it takes is one person. One person can change our whole entire community, can change our whole entire nation. So I say, don't give up. I'm sure you will come, literally people throwing things at you, and you'll be hit. But you need to keep going straight. You need to have that goal really strong. Just get that motivation. You need to keep going. I mean, I say there will always be one person who will not agree with you. It's how, like I was saying, you approach them with a soft tongue. It's how you interact with them and how you get them on and understand. And I think most of all is education. A lot of the misunderstandings is down to how they've been educated about particular cultures, religions, and people.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story which relates to Istanbul. So my grandma, she lives in Istanbul, Jewish household, and every Friday night they have 30 people around the table, and it's a big Jewish balagan, if you know what that word means. Big mess, really, but it's great. And one year we were invited, Three Faiths Forum were invited to speak at Limud. Do you know Limud? It's a big Jewish learning conference in Turkey, so we were invited to go. And we arranged it so that Sana, who you saw on the video, and me would stay with my grandma, and Karsten, who was our Christian colleague, would stay with my uncle across town in Istanbul. And before we went, my mum said to me, I don't know if it's such a good idea for Sana to go with you. I don't know if that's that. I don't know. Like, your grandma's quite old. She's got some funny ideas. You know, Sana wears a headscarf. She's got all these ideas about what that means. And I said, well, when she meets Sana, she's going to have a different opinion. So and of course my grandma was lovely to her. She welcomed her. There was plenty of food. Of course, it's all halal. Fish food, whatever. So Sana came, and by the end of the 3 days, oh my God, my grandma preferred Sana to me. She was like spoiling her. She was like, Sana, do you want this? Sana, do you want some tea? And like by the end, she was saying, what a lovely girl she was, how kind. She was like, and she said, you'll understand this. She's like, bizimkiler gibi. She's like one of ours. She's like one of us. And that to me is like, and this is like an old woman. She's like, in her 80s. And for, people say, oh, when you're older, your mind can't be changed. And I think, what was it about that encounter that changed my grandma's mind? Okay, she still has her thoughts about, in Turkey, there's the politics, and there's the this, and there's the Islamic party, and, she has her fears and her worries about it. But she had really good conversations with Sana. She saw her as like a granddaughter. She saw her next to me, and she saw how I cared for Sana. And I think that is what your role as leaders can be, is setting an example. I'm sure this is something you'll learn in your sessions. Dugma Yeshit, you guys know about that? Leading by example. So showing that you can have those relationships, and sometimes it's really difficult, and sometimes we don't have access to those relationships, and sometimes it's about finding how to do that. If our community is quite closed and is not sees it as a threat to meet with other cultures and other religions, it can be really difficult. But I think by leading by example, by showing that an alternative is possible, a different way is possible, I think you can get quite far.
I've got two questions. One is for the three of you, and one is for Stephanie.
Okay, do you want to choose one, and then we'll come back to you afterwards? Is that all right? So that we get everyone a
we'll
chance.
start with the one for Stephanie. You said you were Christian, but still you disagreed with Catholics' belief, but you said you liked Maria, or I don't know, like you liked character, but so what part of Christianism do you belong to? Because you don't, especially, I can't think of one that really has all the criterias you.
Yeah, no, it's hard. That's why I'm still kind of searching. So, does anyone know how many types of Christianity there are?
25.
Oh, more.
No.
I think there's like 72 or something like that.
Sorry.
So there's the split between Methodists, Protestants and Catholics, and then then everything gets split again and split again and split again and split again. So there are tons and tons of different types of Christians. Catholics are only one part, a large part. But the thing about the Catholic Church that's different from any other type of Christianity is the Pope. And that's not something that I am comfortable with, and so that's why I have kind of moved away from Catholicism. But I still believe in Christ. I still believe in Jesus as the Son of God versus as a prophet. So I believe in that. I believe in the teachings that I learned when I was a child. I believe in what the Christian Bible talks about. So I know in my heart I'm a Christian, it's just I'm not a Catholic anymore. Does that help? Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah, okay.
And something really nice that you often talk about is that you can worship in any church. So you wouldn't say, oh, that's a Protestant church, I couldn't pray there. You would pray in any.
No, I mean, my favorite church in New York was not a Catholic church, and I would go there if I was having a horrible day at work. I would go over there at lunch, walk in, sit down, spend a half an hour, and just clear my head. So it's it doesn't. For me right now, it's about being a Christian, but just trying to find my way, I think.
All right. Yes.
So,
sorry, I didn't ask you your name and your country. What was your name and country?
My name is Zachary, and my dad, my dad lives in London, and my mother in Paris, so I'm
Great.
very
Okay, Zachary. And what's your name?
I'm Noah, I'm from London. So a big problem that I've heard about quite a lot is how extremists often twist the words of Holy Scripture to mean what they want it to mean. It's often used as an excuse for terrorism. And I was wondering, have you ever encountered this in your work like Interfaith? And if you have, how do you cope with it?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. A lot of what we do is trying to get people to respond from a place of I, rather than I've been told and I've been taught. Really getting young people to think about what it is that they believe and why. So of course we do come across some young people who have very strong views that they say this is what it says and therefore. But because we take Ali into a classroom, we take Stephanie into a classroom, we take me or other people into classrooms to say, look, this is one way of looking at the text, but if you look at it in this way, different people interpret it differently, and showing the diversity that exists. Because there's no one way of reading a Jewish text. All of you know that, right? Like you can't. There's no one meaning. There's like 70,000 meanings. So and some of those will have more authority than others. And Ali will tell you maybe a little bit more about those particular verses. That sometimes get manipulated, especially recently you hear a lot about it in the news about, you know, it's written in the Quran, and you know that terrorism is legitimate. Of course it's not. And you know, Sana gets asked a lot in schools, do you believe in killing yourself for God? And she's like, you know, that's not my religion. But it's a shame, because a lot of young Muslims in London today, as Ali will probably say, feel that people look at them differently because of what they perceive to be Islam. So do you want to say a few words on that?
I can talk all day about this. I'll try and keep it really short. Okay, from a theological side, from looking at the scripture, in the Quran, there are two types of verses. You have verses which are straightforward, decisive, simple, like your Lord your God is one, which is in the Torah, in the Gospels as well. But you have other verses which are allegorical. So you understand, like metaphors and allegorical. The way it's explained, in my understanding, is I always explain like this: is we can all see the color of the floor is red. We all have eyes. We all have the vision to see the color of the floor is red. If we are blind, we cannot see the color. So trying to describe to someone who's blind the color of this floor, how would you do it? So you have to, the allegorical side of these verses is trying to get you to think beyond, and I guess bringing out the best in you is what the main reason behind it is. So with these allegorical verses, I look at some of what these extremist groups say, what they try and say, this is how it is. They use a lot of these allegorical verses, and they also use what is known as the hadiths. Hadiths were written 300 to 600 years after the Prophet passed away. These are just sayings, collections of sayings of what he said. From my understanding of looking at history, a lot of these hadiths have been manipulated, have been changed, have been added, deleted, edited. Some of them are, some of them do not agree with the Quran. Some of them contradict what the Quran says. But a lot of these young people are fueled with anger, fueled with frustration, and someone comes along who has their own idea, who wants something to be gained out of by doing this. So you do, I mean, if you look at, I've seen it, I remember seeing with Iraq, with the, when America and Britain came into there, took out Saddam Hussein. A lot of these young men were watching their families die at the same time. So they're fueled with this anger, and someone comes along and says, look, the scripture says this, Hadith says this says this. This is what it means. A lot of them don't think. A lot of them just get straight into it. Yes, now I can vent my anger. Now I can do this. Now I can do this. So they feel it's justified. A lot of these groups is based, like I said earlier, is about education and how they're educated. How they there are some groups who will look at the Quran, the whole Quran, as just decisive. Every single thing means what it says. But the Quran says itself that there are two types of verses. So for me, on the theological side, that's what the main problem lies there. Does that help?
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Noah. That's great. Yeah.
Hi, I'm James. I'm from Bath in England. I've got a question for Stephanie. I'm aware that in Christianity, I'm not sure if it's your view, there is a view that if you don't accept Jesus, you might go to hell, or something like that. Or if you don't accept Jesus or God, and that's why you try and convert some other religions. How would that work in interfaith?
Yeah,
So,
that's not a belief that's spread across all Christian faiths. It was something that I remember from when I was younger, that it was something that was talked about in Catholicism, but it's not so much anymore. So just so you guys understand, the concept is, if you're not Christian, you're going to hell because you don't believe in Christ. My personal view is if my God was only going to let one tiny group of people into heaven, what kind of God would that be for me to worship? He wouldn't, for me, that wouldn't be a God that I would want to worship. So for me, that's not my personal feeling. And I would tell you, not a member of my family feels that way. And I would, I don't want to speak broadly for Christianity, but I can't imagine there's a huge majority of Christians who believe you have to be Christian in order to go to heaven.
But that said, one of our previous Christian education officers, Sarah, was an evangelical Christian, and she believed that absolutely Christ was her Lord and Saviour. She believed that completely wholeheartedly, but she also believed that it was not for her to judge who God would save and who God would not save. And she said, like, it's completely irrelevant. I shouldn't treat anyone differently, because of what they believe. And she genuinely didn't. I mean, she was one of the most amazing charitable people I know. She set up a school in Kenya for non-Christian kids. It's not about, it's about how you treat people, isn't it? And this is a similar thing with Islam and with Christianity in an interfaith setting. It's a good question. We say that a condition of entering the interfaith space is that it's dialogue and not debate. It's not about, using it as a platform to say, and by the way, while you're at it, everyone become X religion. That's not what we're doing. And there are people who sometimes use the platform, but it's not what we're trying to do here. And I think people do understand that. So there are people who believe that, and there are people who make people feel it more than others. But as another friend of mine, Charlotte, puts it, she says, there are people who are walking towards God, and there are people who are walking away from God. And who am I to tell? It's only God who knows. So,
Okay. I think what you do is very important because
what's your name and country?
Michelle from Rome, Italy. It's very important the dialogue between religions, but I study in a Jewish school, so I usually don't have a lot of relationship with other guys from other religions, and so what should I do to know something more about their religion?
Sure. Well, reading is a really good start. Reading about the history and the theology and the beliefs of Christians, Muslims, Hindus. Obviously, finding a good book about it. Some books, may put a particular spin on things. It is a different situation when you live in a community where you don't see so much of other people. But when you go out into the world, when you go, hopefully, to either college or work or university, you will encounter people, and you need to be ready for that. You need to be ready and open-minded and prepared to be able to experience them and to be able to explain to them Judaism in a way that is not kind of very technical and scary, but in a way that's human and that reflects what you believe and how you understand Judaism. And you also need to be ready to say, like I just said with Stephanie, we were talking, that there's different views and being able to represent different views. So what you can do now is prepare yourself for those situations which will come. Obviously, you can also create those situations. So, for example, this wonderful linking thing that we did 2 years ago between a Jewish youth group, a Muslim Somali youth group, and a Church of England youth group in North London. And it was because two of the kids went to school together. And they were quite interested, and it just so happened that their parents were both interested as well, so that's how it began. So sometimes these things can be created. If you have a nearby church or you have a nearby mosque, and sometimes it helps if you create that relationship. But, if that's not where you're at, if you're not ready to do that, if the community is not such that you think that they would be open to it, then it's about being prepared for when you do in life encounter people who are different, how are you going to deal with that? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm Carmela, I'm from Venice. I attend Jewish school, although it's not typically Jewish. We have a lot of Christians and Russian Christians. And it's very hard for me to have that line. For example, I'm very open-minded about Christians, and my friend, she always says, okay, Jews are for us like a big brother, so very stubborn, and they don't agree with us. And I say, okay. For example, I don't think that Christ existed, but okay, I will agree with he was. But I don't believe in it. And she says, I don't believe what you say. And how have the line of respect. How to have the three religions to be like not combined, but to have like work together, and how to make it.
So let me ask you, how do you keep that line of respect? How do you manage it with your friend when she says that to you, or when you say that to her?
We try to just shut her up. Because we can get very argued about that, and we say, look, you're in the Jewish school, so please respect us. You are the minority. But
oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you know, that's one thing is to close that down. Stephanie, do you want to say something?
So I happen to be married to a very staunch atheist. So we have very interesting conversations. And we are at a place where we argue very regularly about the existence of God, about the different things that I believe, and we argue, or dialogue, I guess. We argue though. We argue from a place of respect though, and we argue from, or we have these discussions. I know he loves me, I know that I love him, he knows that too. And these are conversations where we aren't trying to change each other's minds, we are only trying to make the other person understand our position. And I feel like we've been together for 6 years, and it's working better and better the more that we have the conversations. So again, it goes back to, I think it was your question, having conversations and talking and being respectful and asking questions and responding respectfully to questions. Rather than, I mean, I wouldn't shut somebody down, I would just keep
No, we
asking
just
them.
get into the point where it's got very abusive, and we just, okay, that's the end of the topic.
Yeah, you don't want to get to an abusive point. Yeah, it probably is best to kind of put it to the side. Yeah.
So when we go into school sessions, right, how do we make sure that doesn't happen in one of our workshops, right? Because that would be a disaster. So it's a really good point. So we start every session in a school. I didn't do it today because I know that you guys agreed rules about how we're going to talk to each other and about respect at the beginning of your sessions together. But we do something called the agreement for dialogue, where we ask the class, okay, we're going to be talking about some things which are very sensitive, which are very personal. What kind of rules or what kind of framework should we agree to so that everyone feels respected in this space? And one of these tools, well, I'll share one of these with you, which might help. So as well as dialogue, not debate, listening to each other, all these things, we also have something called oops and ouch. So when do you say oops?
It's when you do a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So when you say something and you think, that's not what I meant to say, I didn't mean to say blah, 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 and then you can stop the conversation. So supposing I said, oh yeah, isn't it that like all Christians believe that da 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 da, and I'm like, but I didn't mean all Christians, I meant some Christians, and oh, I've just upset this person, and oops, okay? Then you can time out the conversation and say, okay, why was that, why did you not mean to say that? What did you mean to say instead? And we can try to create a sentence which is better. How about ouch? When do you say ouch?
When you hurt.
When you're hurt, right? So that might be an ouch moment. If someone's being abusive of you, you can say ouch, ouch actually, and you agree it beforehand that you have oops and ouch, and you can stop it and say, okay, why is that ouch? So a great example of this was we ran a session in a school looking at men and women's relationships in the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. And one of the young people said, well, I think man and woman were created, he created them, man and woman, he created them because God didn't want homosexuality to exist. And this one boy goes, ouch. And I was like, okay, what do you want to say? He goes, miss, if there was a gay person in this room, they would be well angry. For those of you who are British, gangster. So he was like, he would be well angry. And in a sense, he was ouching on behalf of someone who wasn't there. He was thinking, actually, that could be really offensive. The way the person said it, like it could be a religious belief that, that they might believe that, but to say it in such a way is only going to upset somebody. And I thought that was it showed such good thinking and caring that he was able, in front of his friends, when it might not have been the very cool thing to do, to say, actually, that's not okay to say something like that. And I think this goes back to your point about how do we stop prejudice and how do we say, there's certain things that shouldn't be allowed to be said and not challenged. There's certain things that we have to challenge. There's also saying, I feel this way. When you say this, it makes me feel. So, sorry to make that a long one, but oops and ouch was useful. I hope you find it useful. Yes.
Hi, I'm Tesna. I'm from Croatia, and it's actually a small and kind of primitive country. And about 90% of population is Christians, yeah. And I was just wondering, we have people are not tolerant enough in Croatia, and there is a lot of anti-Semitism. So I was wondering if what kind of situation is in America about that, you know?
America is huge.
Yeah.
New York, you guys were saying, huge Jewish
New
population.
York in particular.
It's complete. I mean, there's no issues with, well, let's not say there are no issues, but issues of faith are rare in kind of the big urban areas like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. But yeah, when you get into the southern United States, when you get into more rural areas, more country areas, you will find very staunch groups of one particular faith that are opposed to any other faith, whether that, it's not just Christians who are anti-Semitic, but you'll definitely find pockets in the United States that are exactly like Croatia. Yeah. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does prove somewhat, doesn't it, in a sense, that when people have exposure to each other, when they see each other and it becomes normal, and they know a little bit about each other, it becomes easier. Whereas if you don't see people of a different faith or background, you're like, when you do encounter them, it's like, it's weird.
Yeah, and actually just to add on that, my parents live in North Carolina, which is in the south. They moved from Chicago, which is in the north, and they're Catholic. They moved to the south where everyone is Southern Baptist, which is again a type of Christianity. And my mother had to leave her job because her coworkers wouldn't talk to her because she was Catholic and not Southern Baptist. So they're both Catholic, they're both Christian groups, and they refused to have any conversation with her, and they just excluded her from everything. So she quit her job. It's not even just amongst, these big groups of faiths. It's even amongst, it's not just Croatia.
Okay, all right. Yes, go on, yeah.
I'm Lise, I'm from London. Kind of like what Michelle was saying. I also go to a Jewish school, but do you think it's important that in single faith schools they get taught about other faiths and the history of other faiths, so that when they kind of leave school and meet people from other faiths, that they kind of know where they're coming from, so that kind of talking is easier.
Danny, do you want to say something about, you've done a lot of work in single faith schools?
One program that Free Faith Forum does is the school linking. So they link. I did an internship, so I had done a bit of work with the Free Faith Forum last year, and there was a session where they had Muslim kids from a Muslim faith school and also from a Christian faith school, and they do a survey, and they begin by the survey saying, how do you think the kids will be? One of the questions, and both kids on both sides, probably 90% of the kids said, I think these kids will be me. So I think the Muslim kids will be, I think the Christian kids will be me. After having the sessions where they did activities, they got to know each other, they talked, they had the same question, and it was the complete 90% completely changed. They're great. I made new friends. We have similarities, we have common grounds, we have all these things. For me personally, faith schools, there is the argument saying that faith schools create separations in communities. So Muslims will live in an area, and then they'll want to school, becomes a Muslim faith school, and the Muslim faith school is there, so they constantly stay in the area. It is good to learn about your religion, definitely. But there is that segregation, that separation that does happen.
Within the segregation, should they be learning about other faiths as well?
Most definitely, but as say with faith schools, I know a particular, in South London, the Brixton area, there's a Muslim faith school. They do learn the basics of other religions, but sometimes they look at it from their perspective. So I mean, that's within the faith schools. There is that problem that does happen in some schools, but also in other schools you do learn about other religions, and I think it is a definite must. It is a this London society. We use the word multiculturalism. There's so many different cultures, religions. You have to know, like, to share, to get along with each other, is to understand the person.
Yeah, and just to finish on that point, actually, a lot of the faith schools that we work with, at first it was really difficult to persuade them. They weren't entirely, they were like, why should we do this? What's the point? But now that we've worked with them for a while, they say, you know, this is so important actually, because we're preparing, like you said, to like pretend like the Jewish kids or the Muslim kids or the Church of England kids are never going to meet someone who's different to them. Of course, you're already mixing in society. You're already exposed to that. So it's part of education. And Clive Lawton, who was one of the founders of Lumud, he famously said it's the duty of a faith school, of a single faith school, to identify who is outside this population, who is not represented here, and to teach about them, because that's how you prepare your young people for the world. Yeah.
I have to say though, I've gone into a number of different schools. One Muslim girls' school, the girls knew more about Christianity than I did. They were asking me questions. I had no idea. I had to go home and look in the Bible and search on the internet because I had no idea what they were talking about. So and as an American too, we don't study other faiths at all. And so the fact that England has religious education as mandatory in their schools is incredible to me. Like I mentioned to you guys, I didn't know anything about another faith other than Catholicism until I went to college. And that's kind of disgraceful.
Great. Yes.
We were here discussing about relationships between Judaism and Islam and Christianity and Christianity and Judaism. But I wonder, what is about relationships between Judaism and other monotheistic religions and polytheistic religions?
It's a really good question. So sometimes we bring in Hindu and Buddhist and Jain speakers because we think that although we are the Three Faiths Forum, and they were set up because of the Abrahamic link, the fact that they were all, they all look back to Abraham, we also believe that it should reflect the diversity of the society we're working in, and that actually this is about human interaction and not necessarily the theology. We need people to understand where everyone is coming from, not just the people who think like us, So, interestingly, I got really interested in Hinduism at university when I was studying. Everyone used to joke and call me the Hindu, because I was really interested in, because it's fascinating. We're always fascinated by the things that we know the least about, right? It's like, wow, I found it so intriguing that that they have this relationship with the gods that is so intimate as well. Like we think of God as this very huge, almighty being, sometimes referred to as like a father or like a king. But this is the spirituality that they have is much more intimate in a lot of ways, and I found that really interesting. And I asked a lot of people about it, and I think it's the same as learning about either of these faiths. It's that I'm never going to become a Hindu. I'm never going to convert. I don't think, whatever my friends might think or say. And it's just wanting to know and having a thirst for knowledge, and also finding a way to respect it. And there were things that I saw in India when I went there that I thought, I just don't agree with that. There's no way that I could do that, It's not part of who I am, and I had a very, very strong kind of Jewish sort of thoughts and prayers and verses kept coming back to me when I was in India. But the fact is that I wasn't there to agree. I was there to experience and to learn, and I think that's what we kind of encourage at Three Faiths Forum. Yeah.
I'm Noah. I'm from Germany, and I'm in a non-Jewish school, and the most are Christians and two Muslims, and my brother and me are the only Jews, and I respect the other religions, but it seems that they don't really respect Judaism. Not all of them, but it sometimes seems that they don't. Is there a way just to tell them I respect you, so could you respect?
Yeah, that's difficult. That's really hard. I'm not an expert the more informal side of in day-to-day relations. Something that it takes a lot of guts to do this, but like I just used to basically show them how fun Judaism is. So I would my birthday's in September, so I'd bring in honey cake for my birthday, and for Rosh Hashanah, and I talked about it, and I would also ask them about what they believe, and try to engage them in some kind of dialogue where it wasn't I'm going to tell you about me now. This is all about me. It was more about I was really interested to know whether they had something similar, and often they did. It's difficult, it's really hard, but it's also about knowing who does respect you and letting them model to other people. It's like leading by example, letting them show by example that they respect you. It's difficult. I think when it's peer-to-peer, it's much harder.
Yeah, and actually, something that I love about, we have this session called Tools for Trialogue, where we look at a piece of the Bible, a piece of the Quran, and a piece of the Tanakh. We look at a piece of each of them, and we talk about the similarities between them, and also we talk about the differences. But it's amazing when the students see the similarity between their faith and these other two faiths that they thought were so different from each other. So an idea for you might be if they say, oh, we believe in blah, blah, blah. You could say, oh, that's so interesting because we have a belief that's like this, and it's pretty similar to what you were just talking about. And just lead them to see, yeah, there are big differences, but maybe you could get them to respect your faith by kind of showing them how very similar things are, and then moving towards talking about the differences. I don't know. It seems to work, though, in this session, so.
Okay, all right. Who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet? They're behind here. Yeah.
I'm Melanie from Madrid, Spain, and I was asking what kind of events do you organize? Because, for example, a few years ago, I have went to a camp with Muslim people, Catholic, and always some Jews, and it was a great experience. And we organize these kind of events apart from wrestling.
Yeah. Do you want to start by telling me some of the things fun stuff?
At the end of the She's more of an expert than me. I'm only from Stanford.
So I can finish off, thank you for that question, by telling you a little bit more about what Three Faiths Forum does outside the classroom. So obviously we run series of workshops with young people in the classroom. We also train teachers to be able to deal with, so if in a teacher, in a classroom situation, someone was disrespected in a classroom, or if a controversial issue came up, like can Jews and Muslims really find peace or whatever, that the teachers can deal with that effectively so that they're not creating more prejudice, that they're stopping the prejudice that you said. We also have the school linking program, which Ali spoke about. We have 45 single faith schools, mostly primary, so little kids, but also older students that we link together. So over a course of a year, it's not like a residential camp for a week, but it is over a year. They meet each other several times, and they interact, they do projects together, they learn together, and they sometimes produce artwork or craft stuff that they sell for charity together at both their schools, things like that. They do really, really beautiful stuff. And we also bring the parents in, because sometimes, as we know, some of the prejudice comes from the parents, right? So it's good to bring them in to see and say, look what your children created together. So that's the education side of things. We also, if any of you end up studying in Britain, we have an undergraduate program, a university program called Undergraduate Parlia Mentors. And what it means is that politics students from Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, atheist traditions are paired together in threes, little trios of all different faiths, and together they create projects, like what you were saying, like how do we bring people together kind of projects. And then as a kind of reward, as a sort of support for that, they get mentors, so they get private time with MPs, so the leaders, members of parliament, the leaders of the country. So they get an insight like you are getting into Parliament, you're going on Friday, right? Or you're going one day, you're going to Thursday maybe, you're going to Parliament. So you get an insight into how leadership works. You get a step on the ladder towards leadership. But also they have a network of different people of different faiths and beliefs who want to be leaders. and that hopefully there'll be connections for each other to lead together in the future. We also do an artist program where we link together Jewish, Christian, Muslim artists, and we give them grants they have to apply for grants money to be able to make artwork. And we have an arts festival every November, the National Interfaith Week. We do other sort of little projects here and there, so like the linking project between the youth groups that I told you about. What's that? Oh, Faith and Fashion, yeah. So we did this wonderful project last year, mainly for Muslim girls' schools, traditional Muslim girls' schools, where a lot of the young women, as part of their uniform, wear the niqab, so they cover their faces. So we did this whole project about identity and fashion, and introduced them to Jewish and Christian young women who explained their ideas of modesty and fashion and dress and identity. And as a prize, they had to create these portfolios, like books, scrapbooks, where they drew what they understood to be British and Islamic and Jewish and Christian fashion, respecting rules of modesty, and then, or self-expression. And then the winners of that got a week at the London College of Fashion. So they got to actually go and do some designing. So we're giving people opportunities to experience things that they haven't experienced before. I hope, just hearing from so many of your experiences, thank you for all your questions. What I'm hearing is that there is a desire in this room to engage with people of other faiths, and sometimes we don't know how to do that. So, yeah, sorry, I gabble. Joe knows me as well, so I gabble. So there is a desire in this room to work with people of different faiths, and maybe you don't necessarily have the opportunities yet, but be listening out for those opportunities, and maybe even when you get to university, when you start work, you'll have a sense of the responsibility of being a Jewish person, of being a person of a particular tradition who wants to share and to respect others, and to learn about others and to respect them. So thank you ever so much. You've been great.
Wonderful summary, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed that. I've known Debbie for many years now. She's a great friend and an inspiration as well, and I knew that the great work that she does and how important it is, and that she would run a great session. But what I'd forgotten is just how awesome all of you guys are, and all of your personal experiences and everything that you can bring to the discussion. So it was such a pleasure for me watching that discussion and that debate going on between you, how much you were able to ask them and push them, hopefully how much you'll be able to take from a lot of the work that they do and bring it back to your lives and your communities. If you were particularly taken by any of it, I'm sure that Debbie would not mind at all, Debbie and her colleagues, being in touch. I can give you their details, and if you want to ask me, I can pass anything on to them. And I believe that some people have a few little thank you things to give to our presenters. So Ilona and Sasha, you want to come?